Hawaiian time, but I'm from Montana now. And besides, part of our people need to leave at a specific time, so we're going to take it and plow right through. One thing that will be slightly different is the Samoa Gospel Chorus was unable to get their beach concert today. So Mickey was able to come after all, and she brought the chorus with her. I was going to just put them in someplace, but I never was able to get a hold of Clayton Alawai to be definite about today, and I don't see him. So we're going to start out with the Samoan Men's Chorus. And if Clayton is able to be here, he can. So basically it's a suggestion, but please don't feel that you're married to it. I wanted to thank you for coming. When I would bring my dad back for reunions, like giving you guys some pictures that were taken with him, he never wanted to come because he always said, no one will remember me. And I said, don't be ridiculous. They remember me well enough to tell my children unfortunate stories. When they run across them, they remember you. And they would come and have a great time, and we'd do it again. No, nobody remembers me. I knew people remembered him. And I wanted to come here and remember my parents with you, because this was the place that they loved best. This was the place where we made our best memories. It is Hawaii's fault that I am what I am. And I wanted to share that with you so you could all bear some of the responsibility with me. So I really thank you for coming. It's nice to remember them, and it's especially nice to remember them with all of you. So I'm going to get off the platform because I see the chorus coming. They're going to sing 2 songs for us, and then we'll just keep on going. Thank you. Or as we Hawaiians say, mahalo.
Day of judgment may be nearing. What a morning there will be. There'll be safety then in Jesus, Rock of Ages, glad for me. Oh, my loving brother, when the world's on fire, don't you want God's bosom to be your pillow? I'd be over in the Rock of Ages, Rock of Ages, left for me. On that morning, bright and glory, we shall see Him face to face. All the ransom Christ will gather. He has saved them by His grace. Oh, my loving brother, when the world's on fire, don't you want God's bosom
and you're back on the island. Just in time because we don't have enough for Stella. Brother Junior here is from San Diego. He went to visit Miss G at HMA. He's an HMA graduate, and he lives in San Diego. And they're visiting over here they're taking vacation, but he happens to show up, so we gave him a shirt. And this is Jubilee from Santa Ana, California. Also grew up at Central Church. Moved over 30-something years. He was gone from Central. He came with his wife for vacation. We gave him a shirt. He brought his shirt with him. The rest of the group's probably stuck in the rain somewhere by Eva Beach, but they're trying to make their way.
Well, as long as they don't take the shirts back when they go.
I think that's been arranged already.
They say that heaven's pretty, and living here is too. But if they say that I will have to choose between the two, I'm going home, going home, where I belong. Sometimes when I'm dreaming, it comes as no surprise that if you look, you'll see that homesick feeling in my eyes. I'm going home, going home, where I belong. While I'm here, I'll serve Him gladly and singing all these songs. I'm here, but not for long. When I'm feeling lonely, and when I'm feeling blue, it's such a joy to know that I am only passing through. I'm headed home, going home, where I belong. While I'm here, I'll serve Him gladly and singing all these songs. I'm here, but not for long. One day I'll be sleeping when death knocks on my door, and I'll awake to find that I'm not homesick anymore. I'm going home, going home, where I belong. Yes, I'm going home, where I belong. Oh, yes, I'm going home, where I
Amen.
We have to sing 4 songs.
I asked Nikki if you guys were in a hurry to leave, and she said no. Now, was she right or not?
All right.
I'm gonna ride a chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm gonna ride a chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm getting ready for the judgment day. My Lord, I'm gonna ride a chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm gonna ride a chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm getting ready for the judgment day. My Lord, my Lord.
Are you ready, my brother?
Oh yeah.
Are you ready for the journey?
Oh yeah.
Wanna see my Jesus?
Oh yes. I'm waiting for the chariot 'cause I'm ready to go. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm getting ready for the judgment day. My Lord, my Lord.
Are you ready, my sister?
Oh yeah.
Are you ready for the journey?
Oh yeah.
Wanna see my Jesus?
Oh yes. I'm waiting for the chariot 'cause I'm ready to go. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm getting ready for the judgment day. My Lord, my Lord. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm getting ready for the judgment day. My Lord, my Lord, I'm gonna ride the chariot in the morning, Lord. I'm going to ride in the chariot to see my Lord.
Okay, and now we're going to end with the promise that Jesus made in John 14, 1 through 3. All of us here know that promise. Can we all say, let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God and believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go and prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also.
Amen.
Ready? 2.
Let not your hearts be troubled. Ye believe
friend Bob Wong back in the islands. Governor.
Okay, so I hear I have a voice that could strip them. No. Oh, okay. If somebody had asked to pick the 4 favorite songs that I would like to have sung, those would have been it. But Nikki, I really strongly object to that because I cleaned my purse out this morning, took out all the paper towels, all the toothpicks, all the napkins, someone put them tight, and I had nothing, and this loop doesn't absorb at all.
Kenneth Day was born in Jacksonville, Illinois on February 25, 1915 to parents George and Marie Tapscott Day, just 400 miles away and almost due north. A 15-month-old toddler girl, the daughter of Will Snow and Minnie Ringsdorf Snow, was growing up on a busy Bethel, Wisconsin farm.
As a child, Kenny had his grandpa Dave to tell him Bible stories, and Marie had her mother.
The thing popped up and took away my page down. Technical difficulties. Okay.
From these faithful adults, they learned to love the Bible and make Christianity a practical thing in their lives.
Kenny was a curious lad, loved nature, and always sought answers to the many puzzling things in the world about him. Marie's acquaintance with nature was more practical, much of it learned at the business end of a cow.
The second child in a family of 8, Kenny soon became a highly respected leader among his siblings, with even his mother depending upon him to care for the younger ones because he was reliable and fair in his handling of them. Marie's only living brother was 13 years older than she was. For her, there were no younger kids in the house to organize and herd, but it was a farm. It's not like there was nothing else to keep a person occupied. Being a farm girl certainly taught her how to organize and prioritize.
Kenny attended his first 6 grades in the Lafayette Elementary School. At the beginning of the 6th grade, a friend told him a girl was the smartest one in the class. He couldn't stand that and studied all year to beat her. At the end of the school year, his friend had to admit that Kenny was now the smartest kid in the class. That set the pace for his studies and goals for the rest of his school studies. Marie attended a tiny one-room school just across the field from the farmhouse where she was born. During the winters, the walk to school, wading through the snow, was a difficult one. Perhaps this is one of the reasons she so enjoyed living in the HMA apartments, just a short, comfortable stroll from her classroom, with not a snowflake in sight.
In high school, Kenny, a top student, took the college entrance course preparatory to law. That included 4 years of Latin, English, mathematics, and history, plus 2 years of French and assorted other subjects. For fun, he played basketball, joined the debating team, and acted in school plays and skits. Marie continued at her small country school. Her burning ambition was to see more of the world than her isolated community. Becoming educated, being a teacher, would be her ticket to broader horizons than she ever dreamed of in her childhood and teen years.
During Kenny's senior year in high school, the basketball team had made it to the regional playoffs and the chance to be state champions. If they won this one final Friday night game, the next game would be played on Sabbath. He knew he shouldn't play, but he decided that he was going to do his best to win the game, and if God wanted him to keep the Sabbath, he would have to make them lose. Yeah, that always works so well. Well, it worked for Grandpa anyway. As the final gun went off, Kenny made the tying basket and sent the game into overtime. His surge of excitement and sense of God's blessing lasted only a few seconds before his team immediately lost the game in a sudden death playoff. For the rest of his life, he loved, honored, and kept the Sabbath.
Not long before this game, his mother had asked Kenny, "If I save money for you to go to camp meeting, will you promise to go?" He said he would. However, when it came time for him to go, he backed out. His mom told him how hard it had been for her to save that money for him to attend and that he had promised to go, so he finally relented and went. Kenny would often tell how exasperating it was for an early teen to travel 150 miles, going the speed of 35 miles an hour with 2 80-year-old ladies. Not surprisingly, they made it there safely. During these meetings, what he heard led him to accept Christ into his life. That night, during the service, he was introduced to the song, "Jesus Paid It All," and it remained his favorite for the rest of his life.
Marie, growing up with a strong SDA mother, didn't have the same growth pattern in her Christian experience. She was always a hard worker, but as an adult she described the somewhat frivolous attitude she originally brought to life until she was 18. During her senior year, her mother sat bolt upright in bed one Sabbath afternoon, then fell back dead. When Marie returned from the youth meeting at church, she found her father drunk and weeping on the front steps and her mother gone. Her whole spiritual outlook changed that day, and she began to cling to Jesus in a way she never had really done before.
It took Ken 11 long years to graduate from college since he had to support himself by colporteuring and teaching church school. Today, in northern Illinois, there is an SDA church that stands as a result of his work. He also spent 2 years canvassing in Quebec, 1 year alone and another with his wife Marie. This work, too, resulted in the establishment of an SDA church there.
One unexpected advantage of the 11-year degree program was that he was still a student when Marie Snow came to EMC and started running the cash register at the cafeteria checkout. Fortunately for us, too. Initial conversations were necessarily brief, and they learned to take their chatting where there was no impatient and hungry line of people behind him. They married July 6, 1938 in Bethel, Wisconsin. They taught in elementary schools in Green Bay, Clear Lake, Bethel Elementary, and he became principal of Bethel Academy at Bethel, Wisconsin, where Marie was able to teach in the same tiny school she had attended as a child.
After a stint at EMC for more advanced work in education, Ken worked in the wood shop and as a salesman. Marie was a stay-at-home mom during this time, watching her hair turn gray in those first 4 years of their daughter's life. Their daughter maintains this was a complete coincidence. While there, Ken received a call to Hawaii from John Nipschild. He and Marie taught in Hawaii for 14 years. They always considered this to be one of the peaks of their teaching experience.
In 1966, they returned to the mainland to teach at Lodi Academy for Harvey Both, a former HMA principal. They worked there until they retired, drilling English and history facts into another whole generation of students. After retirement for a number of years, they continued to pinch hit at the school and help out in the church. Eventually, age and poor health made it impossible for them to continue, but they loved their Savior and their Bibles until the end.
During the lifetime of ministry that Ken and Marie had, they took over 50 young people into their home in order to help them gain a Christian education. On February 6, 2003, Marie was given rest and the chance to lay down her burden and sleep in Jesus. Ken followed her on June 17, 2013, and they lie side by side, awaiting their Redeemer within view of the site of the old Bethel schoolhouse and directly across from the stand of trees where the Snow farmhouse stood when Marie was born. They have come full circle, and they are at peace. Music.
You sure? I have the music on there. How'd you guys like to sing without accompaniment? Someone is related to my mother because my mother could clean up faster than I could mess. I had another pair of glasses. Do you know where they went? No. Okay. See, I have dollar store trifocals, and you put them and layer them, and they went away.
Well, if you're going to take the... Oh, never mind. Here they are.
Here. Okay. And it cost $2.
Well, you want to make sure you get your money's worth out of them.
I do.
Ah.
Thank you, ladies. It was very, very beautiful. When Susan emailed me and asked if I could say a few words on her father's behalf, I didn't realize that it was for Mr. and Mrs. Day. I thought it was only for Mr. Day. But before I even talk about Mr. Day, I want to thank Susan. Not because she put this thing together, but because as she was growing up, she sacrificed a lot. She sacrificed her parents. She was a latchkid child. When she would go home in the evenings, many times her parents would not be there. Many times the meals were not prepared. Many times they could not tutor her. I was very fortunate when I went home from school, especially elementary school. My parents were always there. My mom was there when I came home from school, and she had a snack ready for me. She had supper ready, a homemade dinner ready. But Susan had to sacrifice, but she never complained. Susan went home many times to a house that was empty. And when the parents came home, they found what they can eat together. So Susan, this afternoon or this evening, I would like to thank you for sharing your parents with thousands of students. Because of your generosity, your parents made a lot of impact on the kids. I first met Mr. Day when I took his class. When I took his class, I knew that something was wrong. Something was different. He was just a different breed of person. I finally realized after a while that Mr. Day was not a religious man. And it was a shocking experience. But then I found out that he was not a religious man, but he was a spiritual man. Now there's a difference between a spiritual man and a religious man. A spiritual individual has Jesus in his heart. A religious individual has Jesus in their head. Mr. Day did not talk about Jesus, but he lived and he showed us what it was, who Jesus was. He exemplified the character of Christ. Mr. Day exemplified Jesus to many of us students who did not know Jesus, but because of him, we saw Christ with a clearer picture. As I was thinking about Mr. Day, I asked a lot of people who lived in Southern California, when I saw them at church, when I saw them at different functions, I would ask them, what did you remember about Mr. Day? And every one of them said, he was such a great man. He was such a wonderful man. I remember talking to June, and June said, it was a rainy day after Hawaiian Mission Academy. School was over. I was walking to the bus stop on King Street, and the rain was coming down. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have a raincoat. My hair was stringy, and all of a sudden, a 1952 Chevy pulled up and honked his horn, and it was Mr. Day. She got into the car, and Mr. Day took her to the Palolo Valley where she lived and dropped her off. This was Mr. Day. You could ask Jerry. Jerry, who was hungry and came from a dysfunctional family. At this evening, he was hungry and he didn't know what to do. He didn't want to go home, and he was trying to think in his mind, should I go to the dormitory and sleep uninvited there for the night? And as the sun was setting, Mr. Day came by and just sat down and talked with them. And then he took him home and had supper with his family, and then gave him a place to stay that night. That was Mr. Day. You can ask Henry, who was having a hard time with his classes, almost to the point of being withdrawal from school. He not only tutored him in English, but other subjects, and he graduated from Hawaiian Mission Academy. You can ask Jerry, who was bullied in school and made fun because he was a little different. He mentored and built up his self-esteem, and today he's a successful attorney on the mainland. This was Mr. Day. This was just a few people he impacted while he was a teacher here at Hawaiian Mission Academy. There's one thing I learned about Mr. Day. He taught us about adjectives. And I know my adjectives. And if I was to say Mr. Day, and I would put an adjective to him, this is what I would say. And this is what many people would say. Mr. Day was a very spiritual man. Mr. Day was a very humble man. He was a very caring individual. He was a loving and kind man. He was a loving father and a great husband. He was a caring teacher. He was a comforting individual, a compassionate friend. He was a giving man, and he was very, very gracious individual. The list can go on and on and on because of the impact he made. If I was to choose a verse that would describe Mr. Day, it would be found in Matthew, the 25th chapter. And it said, "When you have done it unto the least of them, you have done it unto me." That is how he exemplified the character in the students. Many students saw Jesus through his life, not because he told them who Jesus was, but because of the life that he lived. He exemplified the character of Christ. Probably one of the most favorite verses that he has, and I can almost vouch for this, and it was a verse that the quartet or the individual sang, the group sang this evening. The verse that Mr. Day would probably choose would be John 14, 1, 2, 3. You know, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I want you to come back. And I come back for you, and you go with me." This is what Mr. Day is looking forward to. I don't have a reasonable doubt that Mr. Day will be one of those resurrected in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last shout, when the angel shall come. I'm sure Mr. Day will be one of those being resurrected. I'm sure he'll walk around, and I'm sure he's going to look for his students. And many of us here were his students. And I'm sure he's going to look and he's going to say, "I wonder where so-and-so is." And he's going to be looking, he's going to be looking, he's going to be watching. I don't want to disappoint Mr. Day today. I want to meet him there when the Lord comes a second time. I hope that you too will not disappoint him at the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Thank you very much, Pastor Bob. You know, we found kind of the same trouble, even knowing we were doing both of them. It's really easy to have things get lopsided on Grandpa's side, because he was so much more often out in front there doing all this stuff. And yet, since we were there for many years to see the behind the scenes, we know that he accomplished the things that he could because my grandma was there keeping him on track and making sure. Are you having trouble?
Okay, while they're doing that, I'm going to change something in the interest of the class of 64, because I really want you to see the slideshow, and we can talk forever. Trust me. So when they're done with this, I'm going to we'll do the slideshow. Nikki, can you put everyone on mine? On here? And could you leave? Because I forgot all the words. But at the end of the slideshow, when the slideshow is over, whatever. People are here, people want to talk, that's fine. We'll do some pictures downstairs, but don't let that influence it. And then after people leave, because I know he was going to, and Andy, and anybody else that wants to, if you know the story, I may not have heard, because I missed a lot of these stories. In fact, Bob told stories. So I would like to listen to your story, but we'll do that after the slideshow. If you guys have to go through your things, then go. So, got it going? Okay. Okay.
Can somebody also turn off the lights so we can Mom?
I don't know, where's the light switch? No. This one? No. Thank you, Bob.
The sky shall unfold, preparing hills and
And now I'm going to tell you that the man that we've been talking about wasn't really who you thought he was. Kenneth Day wasn't really Kenneth Day. Back in the 1830s, a Scottish missionary started out on his way to China, someplace far away. And on the voyage from Scotland, his wife became ill, and they were forced to make port in Funchal and the Madeira Islands, hoping that she would recover. And being a Protestant doctor and missionary, he did what Protestant missionary doctors do, and while he was there, he began to evangelize. And very soon there was a sizable Protestant congregation. And I don't know how sizable, but enough that the priest was unhappy about it. And it became eventually necessary for these new converts to live in the hills, the caves and the hills around the city of Funchal, because they were driven out of their homes for religious persecution. Eventually, these Protestant converts were smuggled off the islands by a British man of war in the dead of night. And they were conveyed to the Bahamas. And there wasn't enough work for these large formerly Catholic families for everybody to support. And eventually the Presbyterians in the U.S. heard that these new converts from Portugal living in the Bahamas, that their families were starving. And various groups of them on the islands that didn't have as much work were brought to different places in the United States. And my father his ancestors ended up in Jacksonville, Illinois. And when he was, I don't know, do you know his name was Kenneth Edgar Day? He hated that name. Kenneth was okay, but Edgar was nasty. And the reason he's named Edgar was because when he was a little boy, he asked somebody one day, "What's my middle name?" And apparently the days were clowns way generations back, because somebody told him Edgar. And he said, "No, I hate that name. I will not be named Edgar." So naturally they kept telling him his name was Edgar. And it wasn't until, were you guys alive when they went to Japan? Do you remember that? Okay, so I was a full grown up before this happened. Well, I was older anyway. About 30 years ago, he had to, in going to Japan, he had to get his birth certificate for a passport. And when he got his birth certificate, he found out that his name was blank blank Day. They never put his name on the birth certificate. He could have chosen anything he wanted. And he'd been stuck with Edgar his whole life for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Not only that, but there wasn't, I'm sure there was ethnic pride, but you didn't so much tell people about it. So his real last name, before they anglicized it, was Diaz. So he was actually blank blank Diaz instead of blank blank Day. And my mother's name was Maria. Oh, speaking of why we're doing my mother is because one of my Japanese sisters gave me money towards this trip. She says, as long as you're going, make it about Mama too. And that's how it came to be, because I said, sure, thank you. Anyway, her name was Marie Elizabeth Evangeline Snow, and she knew what her name was, and she hated it. So they spent their whole life not liking their names. When I got the funeral folder that you guys, it said Kenneth Edgar Day, and I called up the guy. I said, you know, Dave, take out the Edgar. I'm not going to bury him with that name. He can at least escape it at the very end. And I'm kind of glad that I'm glad my mother didn't actually name me Kenitha Edgarina, because I would have been Kenitha Edgarina Diaz. And I'm not sure I would have done well over the course of a lifetime with that name. Susan Marie Day was a lot better. Perhaps some of you unkind people with better memories remember me as a very naughty child. I got in a lot of trouble at home. I just want you to know. I'm going to get away with as much as you.
Yes, I would like to talk to you after this.
You may not. You may not. I would like for you to know that I came by this honestly. My parents were very naughty children. And when she was a little girl, Her Sabbath school teacher used to tell her, Maurice, no, I hope when you grow up, you have a little girl just like you. And I can't tell you how many times as a child I heard that story and she said, and I did. I never was sure if it was a joke or if it was an expression of, what? Oh, be quiet. So I get it on that side. My dad has told in class some of his stunts. Did he ever tell you about how they tricked the neighbor lady with the horse poops? Because I don't know that he told that one in class, but the horse came down the street because it was a horse era and left a deposit on the road. So he and his brother and a neighbor boy went and gathered up the fresh hot ones and put them in a bag and took them to the neighbor lady. I said, here, our mother sent you some cookies. And the lady says, oh, a nice Portuguese lady, oh, tell your mother thanks, tell your mother thanks. So they went